Yeah, good morning, fellow travelers. Just Jeremiah here in Slab City at the skate park. Getting ready to wrap up my time here. I know I just got back, but with the opportunity to jump in a car and go north, stopping at all the counterculture locations and meeting cool people and exploring and hiking and, with another fellow traveler, why not? Alex is a good guy. He's a really good guy. And he's funny. And we butt heads just enough to keep it interesting. We definitely have different opinions and argue in a funny way. And it'll at least keep it fun. And I try not to travel more than 2 weeks with anyone, or at least try not to plan on it. And then if it goes good after that, I'll keep going. But yeah, since I'm doing that and I'm in Slab City, I'm going to take advantage of this chance to talk about my backstory. Ooh, the origin story. So, my grandparents were born, if I'm not mistaken, in 4 different countries. My grandfather, on my father's side, was born in Lithuania. His last name was Spelis, which is mine. His wife, my grandmother, was born in Poland, and she grew up speaking Polish. My mom's dad was born in French Canada, in Quebec City. He grew up speaking French. My grandmother grew up in Kansas. She was German and Irish, and she grew up speaking English. So it's funny because, when I'm dark, people get confused, but when I'm light, I look very, very white, But people are always very confused by my ethnicity. So French, Irish, German, Polish, Lithuanian. When my father was born, his mom had a problem with alcoholism. And from what the stories go, now a lot of these might be exaggerated, but not by me, just through taking through the filter of my family. I love you if you're watching, but geez, sorry. My family has a trouble with truth, and we learned it from my mom. And I know that's shitty to say, but it's really hard to filter stuff out sometimes and figure out what's actually real. So yeah, my father, his mom was drinking a 5th of vodka every day through pregnancy. She had him 3 months premature, and whenever he was born, he fit into the doctor's hands. He was like that big. And if you look it up, because it took me a moment to believe it, to look it up. The incubator had just come out. My father was born in 1939 in Hartford, Connecticut. And back then, the incubator had just come out on the World Fair. It was kind of a joke, gag thing where they hatched chicken eggs, and they realized they could use it on babies that are premature. So that was rare technology. It had just come out 3 years earlier, and they took my dad, they wrapped him in a blanket and a towel, and they put him in the oven on the lowest rack, on the lowest heat setting. My dad got baked in the oven, 3 months premature, the size of someone's hand. And beautiful enough, he didn't come out with any disabilities. He didn't have the cleft palate. He was a creative genius. He was a very good guy. Someone that I really intentionally modeled my life after. My mom's dad, I heard this story. Sorry, this might not be super interesting, but my family history. My mom's dad, my grandpa Boudreaux, he moved to the States, and he was 16 years old, and he had gone to a square dance, because that's where all the girls are, in his brand new car that I just got that day. And he went to the dance, and there was the prettiest little, as he said, the prettiest little big bosom girl there. And he went and he danced with her, and they fell in love, and that was my grandma. And they were married for 80 years before they both passed away in the past couple years. My mom was born in Hartford, so was my father. My mom was born at 50, my dad was born at 39. My mom, unfortunately, and maybe it's not the place to say, but my mom was sexually abused as a kid. And we'll never know, I'll never know, because of the mental illness involved that was probably a product of the abuse. I'll never know what happened or who it was or anything, but I'm pretty sure it was her grandfather, my great-grandfather, the guy from Kansas. And just to keep it raw and real, he wasn't a good man. He had done the same thing to my mom's mom, from what I've heard through my family histories. And he's basically one of the biggest contributing factors to like things falling apart in my family over the generations. Just to keep in mind through that whole like self-healing thing, I've learned to forgive the man that died before I was born and to not hold a negative energy against someone who's inside of me, in my opinion. I think that all of our ancestors are living on inside of us. But yeah, so he was out in Kansas and he had like 7 or 8 kids, and he was like either the son or grandson of like Irish indentured servants and stuff. And he killed a man or 2, and he burnt down a barn to cover it up. He killed some mail mules. It was a federal post office. So like he was basically like a Wild West terrorist by today's standards. Yeah, he got away with it too. He took all of his family and he changed their last names and left and went all the way to Connecticut. So he got away with it. The animals died, the mules died, some people died. It's part of my family history. That's crazy shit. But my mom was always very shy because something happened to her when she was young, which I still don't know everything about. She was very shy, very awkward, and since my father passed away when I was young and I didn't have the opportunity to get to know him, I didn't learn much about his childhood. Other than the fact that his parents, for some reason, they chose him as far as the abuse goes. He had 2 brothers and a sister, Bobby, Teddy, and Carol. And my brother, my father's the one who got the abuse. Physical, verbal, psychological. I mean, to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if sexual abuse as well. Yeah, you can see it's so much love and kindness, but he also had like a deep sadness that you can see in his eyes. I'll never forget his bright blue eyes. So, my father was working with my grandmother's sister's husband, blah, blah, blah. He showed up around the house because he was my aunt's friend. What up, Mr. Gomez? And, yeah, they started dating. My grandparents weren't all about it because the guy was like, you know, an older creeper guy. He was like almost 30 and my mom was like 18. But they ran away and they eloped. I think they went out west or something. They eloped. They came back. My grandparents were pissed. And they were pregnant with my brother Dan. Now, he was born in 70. And they were actually pretty happy. Like, they were a cute couple. My mom was a beautiful woman. She's still a beautiful woman, of course, but she had that vitality. She was probably like 120 pounds. My mom suffers from weight issues, but that wasn't until later in life. Before, she was just like a skinny, you know, pretty little. She was never like a knockout by the standards of those times, but it's because she was never really done up like that. She was always, again, slightly awkward because of what happened to her when she was young. Well, my family, they started growing and they would do road trips across the country, and my dad was like the Boy Scout leader or Boy Scout guy. He'd take all the kids in the neighborhood on camping trips, and he was a very active father, and my mom had her shit together. And you know, my brother, before my sister was born, I love you, Dan, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. My brother, when he was 5, he got a pony. And there's pictures, and when I was a kid, I still love going through the pictures, but there's a pony with my brother on it, and he like peed himself, and it was the funniest thing, and all these, you know. But when I grew up as a kid, we were so poor, and my mom was going through a mental illness, like, I got a pair of socks once for Christmas, and that was it. So it's not as bad now, but my brother would talk about, like, his childhood in negative terms, and, like, I was, like, abused by my mom the worst, and grew up with the power out more often than not at a trailer park and a you know, a room that just is covered in cat shit and fleas and just stinking, and getting a pair of socks for Christmas. I always found it not funny because I would try to be there for him, but when my brother would complain about his childhood, I'd be like, he got a fucking pony for Christmas. He got a pony for his birthday. But then my sister was born, and they were still doing that happy family thing. And then they were in Connecticut. My mom worked for the School of the Blind, and then she got into the Mormon church. She got converted, her and her sister. Her sister, my aunt, left the church then because her husband wasn't about it. He wasn't putting on the show. My father didn't agree with the church, but he put on the show. You know, he didn't agree with their belief systems, but he could go and do all the stuff. He just wasn't going to fake it and lie about it. Which means that he annoyed my mom. He didn't want to get married in their temple because he didn't feel like he was worthy. He smoked cigarettes. They weren't about it. Neither of my parents ever drank or did drugs. They didn't even smoke weed. But yeah, so then they had me. They moved down to Tennessee. They came up with a plan, a great plan. They said, let's build a summer camp for the mentally and physically disabled. Awesome idea, honestly. They went with like 2 other Mormon families from Connecticut, and they went down to Tennessee to the Luttrell area, which is northeast of Knoxville, northeast of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And they set up this area, and then the grants, they fell through. Now, at first, my dad had to stay back because he had good jobs. He had to leave like good jobs, making like 30 plus bucks an hour back in like the early 80s. And for poor people like us, that's good money. And yeah, so he had to stay back for a little bit and then come down. And what's funny, my mom told me this story where the town had called a town meeting because it's such a small little town, and they rounded up my mom and my brother and my sister and the other 2 families, and they told them, like, hey, we're not going to have a polygamous cult starting here in the woods. And I don't know if you know much about Mormons, but there's the Mormon church, and then there's the reorganized Church of Latter-day Saints. They don't like to be called Mormons now. There's always some jargon change or something in religious types. I'm sorry, but now they're the Latter-day Saints. But you know what I mean. People know them as Mormons. And yeah, so they basically didn't want any polygamous activities, and they said, listen, we're not polygamous. The Mormons aren't polygamous. People branched off of the Mormon church like in the 1800s, and they are the ones you hear about, but that's not us, and that's just a very small fraction of the people who actually practice our religion, and blah blah blah. So yeah, they had to tell the town that they weren't like a polygamous cult. So my dad came down, they had me, and I hate to say it, but that was the beginning of the end. It was just too much stress, like the straw that broke the camel's back. My mom and dad started fighting. It was really hard. I'm sure for everyone.
Can I use your lighter, please?
I don't have one, I'm sorry.
Thank you anyways.
Yeah, no worries. And then, yeah, I was born, and things started getting hard. They started fighting and arguing, and, you know, there was... This is weird because this is stuff I never felt comfortable talking about, because it's like, my family watches this and they're going to hate me for putting our stuff out there like that, but this is me, this is who I am. I'm not going to run and hide from it anymore just because, you know, it's uncomfortable or makes other people look bad, or who really knows. Like, I'm sorry. I'm going for it. But so basically my mom accused my father of molesting my sister. And so unfortunately, again, because my family says so many different stories where there's no other thing to realize but like that they're lying. If you tell me contradictory stories, I'm going to realize. Now that's, I guess, none of my business, but at the same time, like, I lost my chance to ever know my dad. My mom, when she moved us up to Pennsylvania, my dad moved down to Florida, she never let me see my father. He wanted to come and be an active father. To be honest, I don't think he touched my sister. I think my mom was just starting to get to that point where the paranoid delusional schizophrenia was kicking in. And I hate to say it, and I'm sorry, but I think in a lot of times in marriages, what happens is that one person does a really good job parenting, and kids love them for it. And the other person just isn't trying as hard, but they get really resentful at the love and the connection that's being built by the other parent. And no one talks about it, but yeah, they're really jealous about the fact that, I'm sorry, but they're being kind of lazy and neglectful. And so, yeah, they start stuff. And I love my mom, and I'm sure that's not all of it. I know my dad isn't perfect. Since I followed his path, I've learned that, yeah, like, no one's perfect. And, you know, obviously he wasn't this complete hero figure that I imagined. But, yeah, so he wanted to be a part of my life. We moved to Pennsylvania. But my mom wouldn't let it. So it was not until, I hate the flies, oh my gosh. Wasn't until I was like, so by the time I was 13, I had seen my dad 6 times in my life. We'd moved from Tennessee. When I was 3, I was like super crazy gifted and like, oh my gosh, I remembered weird stuff. Like I remember stuff from when I was 2. And yeah, so all I wanted to do was get to know my father. One of my very first memories is my dad coming all the way from Florida right after they divorced to come see me and my sister and my brother in Pennsylvania. And I remember my mom went downstairs and they were screaming. And yeah, if I'm not mistaken, what turned out is that my dad said he was paying child support. My mom said he wasn't. The child support checks were getting stolen. And so my mom said, you can't see your son. So it's always been hard for me because I feel like a big part of the reason I didn't have a relationship with my father was because someone was stealing the child support checks. And so it never got clarified between them what was happening. And my mom always didn't let me see my dad, and my dad didn't pay child support. So I lost access to the money that would have like provided me with more nurturing and healthy upbringing, while also losing the chance to have a father who wanted to be a nurturing and healthy part of my life. So growing up, I had a lot of resentment towards my family. You know, we moved to a town called New Cumberland when I was 3, and then we moved to a town called Mechanicsburg when I was 5, and then in first grade, we moved to Middlesex Township in Pennsylvania. That's where I ended up growing up. We moved to a trailer park called Country Manor. About 400 trailers in this park, and the people were very poor, but very awesome. And I am not talking about their parents. There was a lot of neglect there, and a lot of the parents were awesome, but I don't know if I met the awesome ones. We kind of just ran amok. I grew up 1/8 of a mile from the Appalachian Trail, so I could jump onto it and hike 1,100 miles this way, 1,100 miles that way. We had the creek that went the whole way around the trailer park, and we'd always go build forts on it and go float down the creek and catch crayfish. So as a kid, I was roaming. I mean, by the time I was 10, I had done 10-mile round trips alone on the Appalachian Trail up to the shelters where I meet people in their 30s and have conversations. I was always talking to like adults, like an adult as a kid. And yeah, but they also had a pool in the trailer park, and it was a really nice pool. Got up to 12 feet. We always played games like Sharks in the Water, Minutes and Whales. Hey, if you're listening and you went to Country Manor, I lived there, send a shout out. Sharks in the Water, Ghosts in the Graveyard. Remember those games? Growing up, we didn't have much. My mom, due to her mental health, she struggled with work. There's actually a point where my mom didn't work for 7 years. She just sat on the couch and went back to her room. You know, I didn't mention, but when I was born, my family, we lived in a pop-up trailer. So a 13-year-old boy, a 7-year-old girl, and a newborn baby, husband and wife, all in a little pop-up trailer that's like 7 feet by 7 feet. It's funny when people see me and they want to assume that I'm like a trust fund baby or this and that counterculture. Like, they're all about not conforming, but the moment that like,
dog, you know that you're not supposed to be fucking chewing that.
but the moment like someone acts a little bit different than them, not conforming, all of a sudden they're judging you for not being like them. It's kind of funny. Counterculture just as much a hypocrite as real culture in all reality. But yeah, I grew up so very poor and with absolutely nothing. And yeah, I kind of enjoy when people judge me because they don't have a fucking clue. Uh, but yeah, so like my mom, for some reason, she just at this point she'd been over, probably over 300 pounds, and uh, my mom took stuff out of my sister. My sister had it really hard too. But I hate to say it, but my mom and the way that my sister had stuff taken out on her, they both took it out on me then. They had a lot of hate for men. They really had a lot of hate for men. And my sister had me eat a whole raw onion when I was 3. She told me that. She was babysitting me at the age of 9. She told me that if I didn't eat the whole raw onion, I'd turn into a Jeremiah pancake from her sitting on me all day. And I had a very vivid imagination. I did not want to be a Jeremiah pancake. So I bawled my eyes out, ate the whole raw onion. I mean, she dressed me up like a girl. And honestly, when I got older, she'd hit me and stuff. And it wasn't until I started winning that my mom said no fighting anymore. Yeah, so literally I was kind of just, I was ashamed. I was abused by my mom and my sister, and I was ashamed of it. Neither of them would ever admit to it or want to talk about the subject, so it's like I can't get closure on it. They'd be really upset with me for even mentioning it, but I know my childhood, and it was rough, and I was ashamed of it, and I also didn't want them to like get in trouble for it, so I never told anyone growing up. My grandparents lived like 6 blocks from us. They were kind of making sure that my mom didn't completely neglect us. They were awesome. Tough love, especially my grandfather. He was in the Depression. They lost everything. They were like doing like a lumber mill up in Canada, and they lost everything during the Depression. So yeah, very tough love type. And like, I didn't resent my grandfather, but there are things I resented about him growing up. I never really understood a lot of his lessons he taught me, though, are some of the most important that I hold to this day. But yeah, so they were right there, and yeah, growing up, just basically in the woods. The summer would be there, and I would just be out. I was the darkest kid you've ever seen. I would be outside for like 14 hours a day through the summer, the entire summer. When I was in 2nd grade, I was killing it at cryptology, which is like what the Freemasons and stuff use to decode all their stuff to get initiate themselves in those organizations. It's just where you like switch around keywords and stuff and figure out code that's existing. And we did it for whatever reason in 2nd grade. I've got my theories, but we did it in 2nd grade, and I killed it. My teacher was like, you could have cracked the Navajo codes for the Nazis or something. Like you would have been so valuable in World War II. And I'm not sure she said that because it sounds like she was supporting the Nazis, but whatever. And so they sent me to like a psychologist to get tested for the gifted program, and I like was off the charts in my reading comprehension level, my spatial relations, logic, yeah, mostly them. Like I had an 11th grade reading comprehension level in 2nd grade. Like I didn't just read Jurassic Park, the Michael Crichton novel in third grade. I like fully absorbed it. And by the time I was like 14, I read the whole Encyclopedia Britannica that's like a foot thick. The big red one. You may think I'm kidding. I read that start to finish. I was the weirdest, most awkward, nerdy kid. I could never shut up. Couldn't stop talking. Drove people crazy. I always struggled with friends. To be honest, I feel like I'm probably on the spectrum. I really struggled socially. I had friends and stuff, but I never felt accepted. And I think part of that was because I lived in abuse. I always struggled with my self-esteem, and in school and stuff, I really wasn't super confident. It was kind of weird, and again, like because of the hygiene level in my household, like I kind of smelled, and yeah, I struggled in school. I got picked on until I started fighting, and then people would pick on me, and I'd fight them, and then I'd be their friend. That's how boys work. People didn't pick on me as much then, and I learned to roll with it. Like if people say something about me, agree with them. What can I do then? I just took it away from you. I also learned I lost my train of thought. Wow, 25 minutes in, I gotta keep going. So yeah, I got in the gifted program and we started doing all those like gifted program things in that side trailer and learning about like logical thinking and critical thinking. And why didn't the other kids learn that? I got to like learn to think for myself rather than just like accept what is pushed on me. And I feel so thankful for that. I got an orchestra as a kid. I played the violin for 2 years. Then I switched to the stand-up string bass in middle school. Uh, the one thing people really accepted me for was my art. I could always draw. Started drawing like dinosaurs from Jurassic Park, and then switched to dragons. And dragons got me into fantasy stuff. And then I started reading like Lord of the Rings, and I read that in seventh grade. And started getting into all those big epic novels. I used to read well over 100 pages a day, every day for years, like every day. And yeah, I was just a kid, went to school. You know, I was really smart. I'd go to class and I could pass all the tests, but I wouldn't do any homework. So I basically passed everything with like a 70. And yeah, trying to think, there's not that much through high school. I started smoking weed late, started drinking late. I didn't drink till I was like 18, 17. Started smoking weed when I was 15. Maybe that's not too late. Been smoking real heavy since then. I grew up with these kids in the trailer park that were like the Wigger kids. They loved DMX. Rest in peace. Tupac, Biggie. Just imagine these little white Wigger kids, you know, that thought they were tough. And they'd roll around and they'd get in fights with kids from other neighborhoods and they'd act all cool. And they'd find people like me who they would just pick on and just stay at their house and try to sell drugs out of their house so they wouldn't go to jail. And I thought I was cool. I learned to sell weed. I learned to roll blunts. I wasn't cool. To be honest, I was cool. It was cooler than them. I could have taught them some stuff. I could have taught them how to like be a decent person. Like they thought that you had to be like an asshole to be considered cool. And even I'm just kind of glad I stuck on the sidelines as the weird guy because they're all still skinny white wiggers in and out of jail, struggling with dependencies. And I like who I am. I like who I've become. So yeah, I'd seen my dad like 6 times in my life, and I remember in kindergarten. I remember the first day of kindergarten. I didn't have toys and stuff, and the teacher had said, "All right, kids, now everyone can go sit down now." And I just kept playing with the toys. I was like, "No, fuck no. Who is this lady now?" Just kept playing with the toys. I remember getting into first grade when I changed schools, and Mrs. Burkett in my first grade class, my first day, she said, "You can sit here for the present." And I totally sat there and never went to recess. She's like, "You can go to recess." And I was like, "You said you'd give me a present." But yeah, so as I started getting older, yeah, I was again towards the age of like 13, 12. I had only seen my dad a couple of times in my life. And at the one point, my dad had asked to go pick me up and take me on a trip to go meet his brothers and meet our family. And somehow my mom said yes. I was on cloud nine. I mean, I had gone once to fly to Florida, and I spent a week there. That was pretty amazing. In Florida with my dad, the Cocoa Beach Pier. My brother was there. His girlfriend changed in the hotel bathroom, and I got to see through the crack and see a pair of tits. Oh, yeah. Bobby Joe. Remember her, Dan? Bobby Joe? Sorry. Totally saw them. Uh, but yeah, so my dad came to pick me up in Pennsylvania, and it was incredible. It was everything I ever wanted. I just figured finally we get to have a relationship. My mom's going to let us. You know, that's all I ever wanted. And that's what he wanted. And we went on a trip and we went to Connecticut. I got to see all the places he had grown up exploring. He had poached mink and stuff. He'd go into wildlife preserves and poach. And I'm into conservation. Honestly, a big reason is part of that. Part of that, I've taken a lot of my dad's positive stuff and kind of dropped a few of the negative things and try to make up for some of the things he might have done. Kind of feel like that's all of our responsibilities for our parents. And he took me to where he first surfed, and we went up to Moosehead Lake in Maine, and I met his brother Bobby in Connecticut, and met his brother Ted in Maine. His brother Ted, my mom said, was in the militia, and I got to his house, and it was this little shack, maybe the size of the handlebar, and every single inch of the wall, everywhere, had a different weapon on it. Like There's an AK-47. There's a ninja sword. There's everywhere. The bathroom had like 30 weapons in it. This guy was. That's when I realized like my mom's crazy, but like she's also right sometimes, And he was awesome. He was so nice to me. My dad's family was so nice to me. And we stayed up there a few days, and we rode back. We stopped at my family, my Aunt Rita's house in Connecticut. And one thing I'll never forget that really changed me is that we were there a few days, and it was going to be the last day that my dad and I were going to be traveling together. And the last night, and my dad wanted me to go fishing. My dad was an avid fisher. I'm a big pansy. Like, I feel bad for the worm. I don't want to shove a hook in a worm. Every time I did, I'd throw it in the water, and then I'd pull some poor little fish's throat out because it always got stuck. My hook always got stuck in their throat. And then we'd throw the fish in, they'd be like, oh, it's fine, but I knew it was dying. And I hated fishing. And my dad wanted to bring me fishing, and it was just love. That's what he loved. But Saturday Night Live was on, and my mom, who didn't let me watch anything, we'll get into that in a second. I was like, I gotta watch the funny stuff with the adults, and I stayed back, and I'll never forgive myself for not going there. I'm sure he wasn't, but a part of me feels like my dad was probably a little ashamed of me. Like, he went and he caught the biggest, like a 4-foot striped bass out of the river, huge. I remember the next day getting a picture with it. I had my dragon shirt on and my hair that was like hydrogen peroxide and like a bowl cut. Yeah, so he took me back to my place in Pennsylvania, and I just remember asking him to stay for a few days. Stay for a few days. I wanted to show him so much of my childhood, my stuff. I got to see his stuff, but he really didn't know anything about me. But he had a surgery. He had a back problem for when he was young. And he had to go get some metal thing put in his back where he'd basically never be allowed in the water again. And he was a surfer. Uh, so he was not looking forward to that. And I was crushed. I wanted my dad to stay and see my stuff, and he didn't. But I was so happy because I knew that now we were friends and we finally got to build that relationship. And like from there on out, like my mom would let us, and I was so happy. 2 days later, maybe 3, 4 days later, my brother gave a call, and my mom gave me the phone, and he told me my father had passed away in his sleep. He was back home in Cocoa Beach. He had a second open heart surgery. He kept smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day. He died alone in his house. I did not see that one coming. I took it hard. I don't know if I cried that much. I did, but... And then the way I took it hard is I blamed my mom. I blamed my family.